Hey, what's up, you guys? Bloody Jacob here to give you my thoughts on Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, which released just a couple of years after his first Halloween movie in 2009. And as I said in my last video, this might get me lynched by certain members of the horror community, as I know the Rob Zombie Halloween films are not, the majority, most popular entries in the franchise. Although I have seen more love and appreciation for them a bit more over the years. But as I said in the last one, they are my favorite Halloween movies. And over the years since they've come out, they've become some of the most important slasher and horror movies in the world to me. So personally, people are allowed to think differently than you. They are my favorites. And I've always sort of flip-flopped between which one I actually prefer, whether it's the 07 film or the sequel here. And in watching it again the other day, I do think definitively Zombie's second Halloween film is my favorite between the two, and is my favorite in the whole franchise, and thus one of my favorite slasher horror movies. Pretty much everything that I really like and dig and that I think stands out about the first one is intact here, on top of its own, sort of amplified strengths. Now, the first movie did have the benefit of, Dag Fetch's, Michael Myers as a kid, which I think was well handled for the version that they're going for, and that's one of my favorite portions of the first movie. But, in this you have like a recast because the, Fetch had become too old by this point. He looked a little too grown. So that's like a detriment to some of like the visions and flashbacks that are in this movie. But nonetheless, I think this movie sort of kicks it into another gear otherwise. Whereas the first movie, it did eventually still become like that Halloween remake we're expecting to a point, done by Rob Zombie, of course. This one sort of gets to go on its own path. We do open with that hospital scene, which is an homage to the original sequel. And it is intense. You even have Octavia Spencer in there as a nurse. Caroline Williams, who I don't really care for all that much personally, but that's neither here nor there. It is very intense, very just in it. It is a dream sequence, though. I know some people have issue with that, but I think it was good to say, sort of give a wink at the audience for the original sequel, but then we're still kind of going on our own path. But still done very, very well. And speaking of kicking it into another gear, though, what Scout gets to do in this movie, on top of me preferring her as Laurie Strode in the first movie and sort of just, I think, doing better with that initial, neighborhood, regular Laurie Strode take, you get to see her really delve into the mental toll, turmoil, and trauma after the events of the first movie, and I think on a level that's way more raw and just, justifiably messy than we got to see Jamie Lee Curtis ever do. And that's a strength, or a difference in the writing, I suppose, sure. But I think Scout's performance here is on another level versus anything Curtis was able to ever do as an actress, personally. I've seen people say, Laurie's unlikable in this movie. She's so harsh and irritating, and, you just don't, she's just so off-putting. Well, yeah, you kind of fucking would be, you know what I mean? I did watch the director's cut, which, maintains some of the, Laurie and Annie scenes and other, kind of bits of, Laurie's kind of mental spiral. The theatrical one is still fine with it, but I do prefer the director's cut for, some added character details here and there. Although I do prefer the theatrical ending, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But yeah, Scout just does very, very well with it. And I think it kind of took a turn, for being, for going for that approach of showing, she's not holding it together, and she's kind of, pushing away and just being completely toxic towards everyone around her. Like she says in the movie, she sees Jamie's face, or not Jamie, Annie, Danielle Harris's face, and just reminds her of all that she kind of felt she was responsible for, and for the brutal assault that Annie experienced in the first movie. She is now living with Annie and Sheriff Brackett. It's also good to see a bit more of Brad Dourif in this movie, who does really, really well. You have Dr. Loomis. Malcolm McDowell again does very well for this version of Loomis again, especially in the first, paying homage to what Donald Pleasance brought to the character, but then very much distinctly making him Malcolm McDowell. And this, it's very much his own. You have him sort of selling more books, kind of becoming more greedy and arrogant. And I think that's sort of like a mental path of him sort of like blocking out the responsibility he feels for Michael's rampage. So you have a little art for Loomis in here as well, where he sort of has to come back down to earth and, sort of realize his faults and all in terms of what he's done, and then bring it back down to what actually mattered. And Tyler Mane himself here is as good as ever. Again, just how Rob Zombie's able to direct violence, the editing with it again, is just very visceral, very intense. All that's nicely done. His mask is torn part way through it. I actually like the hobo Michael Myers look. I think it fits with the point of the narrative they're communicating. One bit I don't think that works fully well is, the morgue bit, right before the hospital scene, where Michael's body's being, transported supposedly. And you have Richard Brake, and I freaking love Richard Brake. But when it crashes and he says, fuck, like 30 times or whatever it is, it's okay. We don't really need to do it that many times. It just gets a little awkward. But otherwise, this movie is just so underrated, and I honestly adore it. And spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, okay? Annie's death scene in this, and when Scout or Laurie discovers her body, and then Brackett, of course, a little bit later. The music they use for it's perfect. They even use like that kind of home footage of Danielle Harris as a kid, and how they interweave that's just really I think impactful and emotionally weighted, and you're not going to find anything like that in the other Halloween movies. And man, in terms of the ending, I do like, Loomis sort of watching back at the tapes from the Chris Hardwick interview he does, and just saying it's over. Then he genuinely wants to come back and actually help, even going in there to confront Michael again, who has Laurie, and telling Brackett, this is what I owe you. And so I think he kind of expected to die in this. And I know people have issue with the white horse thing in the movie as well. Rob Zombie's talked about that. It was just meant to kind of symbolize his innocence from his childhood and everything like that. And I thought it worked. I don't think it was really overplayed all that much. I don't really see what was so stupid about it. I just think the theatrical ending worked better. It's oddly more violent with what happens with Loomis. In the director's cut, he gets tackled through the the wood in the shed, and Michael yells "die," and he stabs Loomis once. But in the theatrical, you don't get him yelling "die," which is a plus. And he slices up Loomis's face and stabs him repeatedly over and over, really kind of asserting his blame with it and taking that out on him. Which again, you would think would be the more violent bit in the director's cut, but no, it's the theatrical. And Brackett is able to get the shot in on Michael. Michael is partially impaled. Laurie actually says, "I love you, brother," to give him some measure of peace before taking out her grief and her anger on him. Stab, stab, stab. And then you have Laurie walk out, and she is not shot in the theatrical, which didn't make sense either in the director's cut. And you get that psychiatric shot with the music playing and, Scout Taylor Compton's smirk. I just thought left off on a really good note. There was going to be a third one, but Rob Zombie backed out, and they had other disagreements behind the scenes. Would have been nice to see what a third one would have looked like, but I do think it's fitting for the narrative of these movies to end where it does here. But yeah, I think it was honestly incredible. I love Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. It is my favorite Halloween movie, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I'm giving it an AA+. You guys can think what you think, and I can think what I think. Follow me on TikTok, of course, Twitter, Instagram. Let me know what you guys say.